Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to Luxoft's webinar, The Alchemy of Data Monetization, Turning Your Data into Gold, Practical Advice for Business Professionals. We're here to focus on a very interesting topic, which really ranges from mortgage interest rates all the way through to social media likes, but obviously the impact on your business and certainly within the enterprise. Now, as you can see on this slide, are two distinguished guests. My name is Pat Corcoran. I have the honor of hosting these two distinguished guests. The first is my colleague, Dr. Ken Arcuar, who's our Chief Data Alchemist. He's responsible for loads of complex project work all the way through across Luxoft and has been keen on really developing the topic around data monetization as an offering for the business. We're also joined by Mr. Giovanni Marchetti, who is a principal Azure architect from the one and only Microsoft. Giovanni himself not only has gone through the world of service delivery, architecture, implementation, but has developed a lot of intellectual leadership around this topic. I'd like to welcome you both here, gentlemen. Let us begin.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here today. This webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a link in email as well as the slides and an ebook within the next few business days. And we're going to talk about data monetization, and that's data as a profit driver. Now, some of you are probably saying, well, we've always used data to make our businesses more profitable, and that's true. And there are a number of people in most organizations who deal with data on a regular basis, and use titles like business analyst, financial analyst, strategist, and sometimes statistician, economist, mathematician. And over the past few years, two more professions have been thrown into the mix: data engineer and data scientist. Now, these are the people who pull all the data together, extract insights, make it available in ways that enable you to do things ranging from selling your data to others directly, or using the data to make better, faster business decisions to drive your business forward. And data monetization is a lot more than just hiring data scientists. As we've been helping companies around the world with data engineering, we've seen 5 main challenges emerge. On the next slide, you see that for business leaders, there's been a number of challenges. First, you can let the data scientists figure it out. Data scientists know how to prepare data, create models, fit the data, but none of that helps you unless you have clear business challenges you want to address and you understand how you can use better data to make better decisions. And then there's the inability to work across business silos. Businesses have been designed so each business unit can operate independently, and there's a lot of good reasons for that. So typically you've got, in a large business, you've got individual silos where they have their own charter, their commitments, their own KPIs, and their own goals to increase the return on investment of that unit. But it also tends to create data silos that are isolated from one another, and there's no incentive to share. Third one is inefficient or disconnected infrastructures. Most companies, large or small, can have an enterprise resource system, a customer relationship system. They'll have financial systems, sales, marketing, customer support, and they're often not designed to synchronize data. And just like a siloed business unit, siloed data systems limit your ability to discover and orchestrate data monetization opportunities that could save you a few million, a few tens of millions. And some of the examples I'll show, we're talking about $100, $300, $800 million savings. And so these are really important roadblocks that you need to recognize. The other one is investing in the latest algorithms and approaches as opposed to what might be most useful for your business. Yes, convolutional neural networks solve some amazing problems for us, and that's great. A lot of business problems that are going to put money on your bottom line don't need them. And the other thing with the data scientists and hiring people with advanced degrees, they have deep mathematical and statistical skills and backgrounds, but the farther you go in education, the more specialized you become, because you're supposed to be focusing on learning and solving problems that people haven't solved before. And depending on who you hire, does their expertise and area of specialization match what you need now and going forward? Algorithms and match to problems you're trying to solve. You want to deliver actionable insights, not just say, I've got people who know how to do the cool new thing. And finally, data science is just the start of the work. Once you get good data to your data science team and they build great models, you need to keep delivering insights. You need to grow into new areas of your business. You need production IT systems that now do ingesting of the data, clean it up to make it useful, run it through the models, and then push it out in ways you can make decisions with. And so I usually ask executives when I talk to them about data monetization, did you do your investment to leverage the buzz around AI because it sounds like a great marketing tool? And I have seen companies that's really what started. Or did you build a solid strategy, define a roadmap, have realistic and measurable goals before you started spending? And there's one really good tip off. When you see senior executives at a company talking about their embrace of data science and embrace of AI, they talk in very general terms. And if you're a data scientist, you see the tells that, yeah, I think they're really just making that announcement because that'll get them some press coverage, as opposed to the ones who really get it. They're able to take in less than 30 seconds and give you a solid value proposition for why they're using it, just like they would use any other business tool. Next slide. Now, for data scientists, there's a lot, not just data monetization challenges of getting and acting on your data, it's telling a story to your executive team that they'll get it, that they'll know what you're trying to do. And that also means addressing sometimes what seem to be awkward questions, but these are people asking real questions from their perspective. Things like, how can I decide on something based on the data? I get everything I need from the quarterly reports. Data is just a distraction. Or I trust my judgment more than I trust that data. Or how is your data relevant to my business? Or your data is fine, but I don't agree with your analysis. And I don't know what to do with that data. And we wouldn't make those decisions even if that's what the data says. And this comes back to knowing the full story. Do you know the key business issues that you needed to solve before you undertook the analysis? And even more importantly, do you know how to present the results so that your leadership will understand and embrace them? And that's something Giovanni and myself have encountered over the years. And Giovanni, you had some comments on some of these questions specifically in your experience.
Yes, first of all, I must admit that we've been guilty of all of that, all of what you said in our projects, and we've chosen technologies because they were cool, etc., and did not mind the business input too much, so that we could just complete the research that we wanted to complete on the data set we had. So in that, I think there are two important comments to make. One is that we are guilty of not paying attention to the business needs in the effort to further our own research. And at the same time, when the business comes back to us and says the data is fine, but we don't agree with your analysis, or we won't do it even if the data says we should. The converse is also true. Sometimes business has some preconceived ideas of the results that they want the data to show. And when they don't, they object to your analysis. And you should be prepared for that, to defend your research and the validity of your research, and at the same time, to do research that is valid and useful to the business. So the discourse goes both ways, basically.
Yeah. And that just takes us to the next slide. You know, because compelling data monetization strategy, you really have to talk about it in terms of the business. The people who lead a business have to make decisions every day about what's best, and they make that decision with the best available data at hand. And part of the data science job is to make better data, more actionable information available, so you make better decisions because you have even better data on hand. And so that means articulating how the corporate data generates bottom line results. You know, it's always, what's your elevator pitch? You get the executive in the elevator, you got 30 seconds and they say, what are you working on? How do you communicate what that value is? And the key questions typically that we find you need to address is, what are you doing with data monetization? What are the risks? What are the benefits? And then what's the cost going to be to build that capability and execute the strategy? Because when you're talking about data monetization, you're talking about using data to change the way the business works. You're talking about transformation. And just like any other transformative strategy, it needs to be approached with care and consideration about how the business operates and what kind of parameters you can play with and what you can't. And this is at the heart of data alchemy. It's something Giovanni and I have experienced over the years. You know, we have multiple degrees and we were specialized, but we also took that time and recognized I needed to learn how the business runs. I need to understand finance. I need to understand regulatory and compliance constraints. I need to understand what privacy legislation does. I need to understand how business leaders within my organization run their business and what they're measured on, and how I will help them achieve their goals, as opposed to saying, look, this algorithm or this piece of software is really cool and it lets us do the following to the data. And that's at the heart of what we're calling data alchemy, where you turn something of lesser value, your business data, into something of greater value, which is with that data, I can make happier customers, I can decrease costs, increase profits, reduce fraud, reduce churn, and I can show you ways to measure that we achieve those outcomes by transforming how we do things with this data. Next slide. So the most important point about data alchemy, about alchemy in general, was before you could turn lead into gold, or in our case, data into gold, you must transform yourself to be worthy of doing that. And that means going beyond the data science algorithms and approaches so you can sell projects to executives because you speak their vocabulary, how they will absorb information and act on it. You can describe succinctly how do you measure success, and then show that you can deliver on time with a realistic budget. Because that's another thing that you need to keep in mind. No matter what you're trying to do with data, you're always competing for budget with other projects that may be just as important or more important than what you're trying to do at the time. So you have to think like a business executive. You have to transform yourself. You're not just having to talk data science. You talk business in a language people understand and get and will act upon. Next slide. Now, how do you know you're a data alchemist? I said, you got to do a whole bunch of things. Remember, with alchemy, you're always working with earth, wind, fire, and water. Well, here, you're working to identify and understand key business problems. You do apply data science to make progress to those solutions, to those problems. You may not always get the exact solution at first, but you come up with things that enable you to get farther along to solve the problem than you did before. And you always have to connect that to the bottom line. How are the money you're asking them to commit to your project going to improve the bottom line? And then you have to be prepared. How do you show you achieve those with success metrics? And if you hit the next slide, that means how do you transform yourself? You have to have business experience, domain experience, financial experience, execution experience. And that means partnering, because you don't get those by osmosis. You've got to talk to people, work with people, understand their problems, talk about how your specific area can bring value to what they're doing. So it doesn't matter if you're a data scientist, you're a business executive, member of finance, you're in the IT department, or you're just a really good project manager. By partnering with others and learning what they're doing, you can get the kind of experience you need to be able to bring all of that together. And bring all of that together as a team, because data alchemy is a team sport. Next slide. Okay, what is data monetization? I've talked around about everything you need to get there. Let's look at some examples. So there's really two ways to monetize data, direct and indirect. Direct is what most people tend to think about. I'm going to sell my data, and someone's going to buy it from me and do something with it. And then indirect monetization, which is typically a better way to start because you get faster ROI. We're talking 9 to 12 months, is use your data to make better business decisions. Get insights to improve your business. That's usually also the place to start where people are more comfortable because they can see results within the year. And we're always talking about having to make an investment in data monetization. And that means you're going to put some money in and not see a result for a while. If you tell them you're going to put money in and see the results 3 to 5 years from now, that's sometimes hard to swallow. If you show a quick win that you can then build upon, that's the way. Next slide. So indirect monetization, we'll just go through these quickly. It's all about reducing costs, minimizing risk, reducing fraud, increasing revenue. And the other one is better products and services. You can create personalized or better shopping experience, customize promotions, improve products and services, do more effective marketing, bring new products and services to market, or even use the data to say, what can I give my customers and partners that increases my brand affinity, that makes them want to come back to me for more information and makes my brand more sticky. And the other thing about real projects, after your first success, the machinery that you build to make that happen, deliver the information executives for action, you can usually use to optimize multiple aspects of your business. So that investment continues paying forward. Next slide. So let's look at it in action with a couple of cases. Let's start with, next slide, please. Indirect monetization, optimizing the business. Major telco, they wanted to go look at all their customer data and use it in ways to give customized content to them, to make it stickier, to improve sales and revenue, reduce their OPEX, reduce customer churn and fraud. So they started with a recommendation engine that we partnered with them to deliver. Found all their data, and we had like 157 data sources that needed to come together, and built up machine learning, AI processing, series of models, streaming analytics for real time, that enable to pull in what people are doing and then push out actions. And you see, we were started out by giving, improving sales and revenue. And then we branched into the other areas, and we connected with the customer, email, web, SMS, call center, and eventually branched out into credit card fraud prevention, personalized, using their phones and their cars for better driving experience, third-party offerings. And that resulted in $300 million in cost savings. That's just from using their data they had on hand, bringing it together, optimizing it, and using it to figure out how to make better decisions with it. Next slide. Let's look at direct monetization. This is where you're selling data. In this case, over-the-top company, video, they had advertising time to sell. Let's make it as easy as possible. So we partnered with them to turn their set-top boxes, in essence, everything they use to interact with their customers, into IoT devices, streaming information into us. And then we built a machine learning system around it so that we could produce insights as to what kind of demographics on a per household basis with respect to their personally identifiable information and the compliance regulations. You can't disclose to third parties everything about your customers. You have to create buckets of demographics at the household level, and then let them pick the demographics they want to sell to, and then make it as easy as possible to sell those ads. So in the end, it's an ad platform with data brought in on top of it to make it easier for an advertiser to pick their audience, buy the ad slot, and plop their ad in, and then get their analytics back for how effective it was. What did that do for that customer? $100 million increase in ad sales and revenue. And this is typical. When you're a really big company, getting 100 million in savings by doing even modest data projects is possible. But no matter what size your company are, getting a healthy return on your investment is possible. Next slide. Okay, how do you get started? I've said, okay, great savings. There's things you can do. How do you get started? No matter what you do with direct or indirect monetization, the approach is the same. What data do you have? From that data, what kind of use cases can you build? How can you monetize them? Got to build pricing models, business models, and then what solutions can we build and implement to do multiple use cases? And you notice it's we. The we is important. As I said, you don't work in isolation. These projects need the participation of business, finance, IT, the data science team. So everybody knows where the value is, can articulate it, and can drive forward together. Next slide. And this is the typical project workflow we do. You want to get results early. You got to be business focused, get the analytics going as soon as possible, get at least one stream producing results to show to your management that the project not only works, it works with your data, you can get something through the system, and you can get actionable insights as soon as possible, with a return on investment where you can see that you're realizing the key performance indicators in 9 to 12 months. And you focus on quick iterations. You gather your information, your customer, your clients, get the data feeds together, get it prepared and cleaned up, build out your analytical function, validate your models, get a POC built. And then just like any other project, you finalize it, system testing, scaling, bug resolution, deployment, support, and then the handoff. And either to the customer who wants to take it over and run it, or we continue to run it for them. There's a number of ways you can do when you're partnering with a company like Luxoft. Next slide. This is key. Data preparation is critical. Here are 8 things that you typically have to think about. There is a saying that better, more correct data is always preferable to simply more data. Bad data can skew your models. Poorly prepared data can make it so you're not really predicting what you think you are. And that comes down to data. You may have a lot of it, you may have a little of it. Sometimes, they say more data is better. For some applications, you're going to have to sample down that data to get something manageable in your training, your test, your validation sets. And it's really going to depend on the given situation. But can you actually get the data you need? Can you remove bad or duplicated data? What happens when you've got multiple customer records and the address is slightly different in each, or maybe the name is spelled differently, or there's a middle initial, there's not a middle initial, or the address is expressed in several different ways? And standardize your formats. Sometimes as simple as, like I said, we had one with several hundred systems we're bringing together. A lot of different date formats. You have to standardize those. Sometimes you have to do interesting transformations. Like sometimes you, when you're building out, you do things like the time of day or day of the month is expressed as coordinates in a circle because that has certain valuable characteristics for certain algorithms. Other one is anonymize and debias the data. There are personally identifiable information regulations, there are compliance regulations, things you must by law follow when you're working with data, especially when you're preparing data for sale to third parties. And there's a lot of gotchas in there you have to be careful of. And the other one is sometimes you'll bias your algorithms unintentionally because of the data you have available at the time. Normalization. Some algorithms you need to do transformations to your data before it can even be useful or accurate or give you good results. And then enriching and augmenting data. Yep, you've got great customer data. Maybe you need to buy data from third parties and add it on. There's a classic one with telcos where you've got all the information about calls with customers and you've got coordinates of the towers they're working off of. And then you buy geographical information from a third party so you can be able to locate where they are when they did the call to do certain things. And again, we're back to anonymizing and debiasing of data because yes, that's a lot of information about a customer. You need to be careful what you're allowed to do with it. Then there's feature enhancement, which can be an entire art in itself, and keeping your data up to date. Sometimes the data you start with your customers doesn't represent your customers after 6 months, and you're going to have to retrain your models or adjust your models to keep them fresh. Next, and Giovanni, you had some comments on this one too.
Yes, I just wanted to say that these are problems that are so common in both the consulting and research work that we do that we have actually made our tooling available through an open source library that we leverage internally at Microsoft, but you can leverage as well to inject some artificial intelligence into the data preparation workflows and do all sort of cool things, such as, for instance, learning from example. You have a large data set and you want to provide a few examples of how the data should be transformed, and the tool set works out what the transformation should be in the process, and then apply the transformation to that whole data set. All of those are available to you, both as the library open source and as a set of tools that run in our cloud for you to experiment with. So you're not left alone to basically devise what your data preparation workflow should be. There is a lot of intelligence that has already been built into existing proprietary and open source tools that you can leverage.
Data analytics gets embedded into corporations, the simpler the tools they're getting. And that's actually a good thing. And today and again, from all cloud providers, there are tools. And you're going to hear a little more about specifically Microsoft tools. Giovanni's my guest. There's a lot of systems for solving these. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about some thought starters for data monetization. Next slide. let's look at some things people have been doing. How about better in-store experience? Companies that have brick and mortar presence, they don't have a great online presence. How do you get people more sticky? How do you get people to come into your stores more, to get into the habit of coming in? How do you keep the shopping experience exciting for them and interesting and new things? This customer wanted a tighter connection to their brand and made the in-store experience more attractive than just buying online. And they wanted to gather customer data to try to see if they could use that later for more optimizations. So it was about delivering a personalized shopping experience. And they had about 100 plus store locations. The risks: can you get the data? Remember, can you get the data in one place? Can you do the data science to determine the offers that do better store affinity? Can you do the privacy and compliance regulations to get to the project goals? And the solution was we built in-store displays that make personalized offers on the aisles based on patterns and preferences. And we had a branded mobile app with push notifications when they're in the store, sales, other offers, things that really make them feel that the store knows what they want, but also gives them interesting new things to think about. So it's not just we optimize only on what you typically buy until someday all you can find in the store is what you typically buy. And that kind of kills the in-store shopping experience. And the strengthening of the brand: meet the producer, show where the products are sourced from, give people a feeling for what they're buying and a connection to it. It was all possible through a data system that they didn't have before. And the answer was they actually saw foot traffic increase in their stores and got a better handle on who their current customers are, and also customers that they wanted to get into that they didn't realize they could attract and retain. Next slide. This is another one, better customer connection again. But this company wanted to know, when a customer comes in the store, I don't need to know their name, but I want to know how they move about the store, what they do, what they buy, and how can I optimize my stores to help them have a better shopping experience, help them coming back? And what do I do to get them more interested in the store? Because it's not just helping you find the things you always want to buy, but giving you new experiences, new things to discover in the store, and get that brand loyalty stickiness going. But tracking people in a store can be expensive if you don't know what you're doing, if you haven't done it before. How do you, with a lot of stores, buy those devices, inexpensive IoT devices, and deploy them? I can't buy high quality, 4K cameras and put them in the store, put in high speed networks in the store. I've got certain limitations. So we worked with this firm to get low cost smart devices in there to track customers accurately and and we got this running in under a month, and we got it running with a lot of edge ML processing and cost optimization. And so we can end up with 90% accuracy tracking individuals through the store using a cost-effective set of devices. I mean, in the media and communication space, think about that in theme parks, being able to actually track customers' motions and make sure they have an amazing experience in the place, while at the same time maintaining your privacy and the data compliance you need to do. There's some amazing things you can do nowadays, and they are cost effective. You don't, until you work a lot of problems like we do, you understand where the shortcuts are and what you can get away with, and how machine learning and image recognition works at really low resolutions and can still be effective. Next. Finally, sports organization wanted to enhance its partner ecosystem, make its data available to its customers in enriched ways that they can immediately use to work better with people who attend sporting events and people that they serve. So we built one unified system that started small and built up into a full content management system. And because this sports organization, they didn't want to become a giant big data IT shop. So we built and managed the whole thing for them. And you can get really complicated, and the thing is, we have the experience to make it easy, scalable, reliable. And it becomes a matter of corralling your data, bringing it in, talking to your partners with you, and then making something that the partners really find useful. Next one. Now, here are 5 thought starters for meeting communications projects. Personalized recommendation engines for customers. There's a number of ways you can do this depending on the business problems you want to solve, depending on the customers, how you want to reach them, whether they already have in-home equipment from you or whether you want to do it through phones, tablets, smart TVs. Predicting customer lifetime value. how much money a customer is going to spend, comfortably identifying reward customers, keep customers, do better segmentation based on customer data and behavior. Don't assume. You can know. You can do micro segmentation. You can do a lot of this with algorithms. We'll do a lot of the work for you. And you can immediately find that useful within days, weeks, or months of putting this in place. And predict customer churn and retention actions. Knowing when a customer is dissatisfied before they realize it and get up wanting to act with you, because the time they call you and you got to turn it over to your loyalty team, you've got to hustle, and it tends to be expensive, and losing the customer is expensive because it can sometimes cost thousands of dollars to get a new customer or get a customer back. And knowing the signs ahead of time, knowing when to do some offers or reach out to them, can really affect retention. And finally, visual dashboards. Knowing data models and knowing the results are great. If you don't put it into a form, a business leader can glance at their tablet and look at it and know they have to act. You're not getting the effectiveness out of it. And there's a lot of ways to do that that rely on how your brain processes visual information. And a lot of companies are just getting started on this, and we have a lot of experience. Next slide. Okay. Building your data monetization system. I'm turning this over to Giovanni because he's going to talk you through using the cloud and how you can take your steps from starting projects to end project to all the way up to scale up. Giovanni, over to you.
Thank you, Ken. So I just wanted to point out that we've discussed about large companies, complex projects, huge systems that manage complex data flows from hundreds of sources. You don't need to start from that. You can start small with a solution that gets you going and basically presents a report to your business leader that engages them and makes them want to invest more into your research on data and the profit that you can derive from it. Then you can progress when you've hired a data scientist maybe, and you have some budget to do a proof of concept type project to tools like our Azure Machine Learning Studio or Azure Machine Learning Visual Interface, as you may have heard a new name is. And there you can quickly prototype your own algorithms, your own workflows on the data that you get to produce those reports that I mentioned just before. And last but not least, when you've shown the value to your company of a machine learning project, a data monetization project, you can go big and leverage those same techniques that you've studied and developed with those prototyping tools on large-scale data processing systems, such as the ones that Ken has been illustrating so far. And you don't need a large infrastructure to do that. You can leverage our cloud. You can leverage any cloud, really, because most of those tools are based on open source techniques and algorithms that you can implement on whatever infrastructure is most convenient for you. Let's go to the next slide and have a look at a few examples, actually. Starting with Power BI on a small example, open source, freely available data. So Power BI is a tool to do two things: analyze data that you've got and visualize it. So it produces reports, it produces dashboards for your business execs to consume. And for you, it allows you to sketch out those data flows and leverage those data sets that you've got in a nice visual interface that then feeds into those reports and dashboards. I want to point out that we are not blind to the fact that you have data that comes from sources that are not Microsoft. In fact, Microsoft is one of the founders of the Open Data Initiative, which is promoting a common data model. I put a link to the GitHub page when you can find more documentation to it. So Microsoft, Adobe, and SAP are investing a lot into enabling interoperability at the data level and leveraging then each other's clouds to do things like orchestration, preparation, model training, serving out the models, etc. But Let's start from the easy to consume analysis and visualization. Let's go to the next slide. What I'm presenting here is just an example of a report that a business analyst with no code could create. In itself, producing an histogram is not too much of a problem. What you're seeing here is that we have combined data that comes from structured data sources, such as, for instance, attendance at particular hotels in particular locations in the state of Hawaii, with an augmentation of data that comes from unstructured data sources, such as customer comments, tweets, etc. And we've done all of that leveraging models that are pre-built for you to consume. You don't need to code for it. For instance, this particular example, we're doing sentiment analysis to figure out what determines customers to like or not like a particular hotel. And the graph here shows that the fact that the hotel is on the beach and it has a decent bathroom is actually those two are the most important factors in the choice of hotels and driving the sentiment of the customer. All sort of inside that, a business leader that is actually managing this chain of hotel would be very interested in. Let's go to the next slide. I was mentioning that you need data sets, which in this case come from a variety of sources, and you need to build a data flow out of those data sets. And as Ken was pointing out, the building of the data flow, the data engineering, the transformation, manipulation, normalization of the data is actually one of the most time-consuming tasks. So that's where we focused a lot of our engineering effort to automate as much of that as possible. And it's an example of the graphic designer that allows you to build such tools. Such reports using our tools. I wanted also to point out that we're augmenting the data that comes from sources like SQL Server, the common data model that I mentioned, with a set of algorithms that we've dubbed AI Insights, and that you can consume off our own cloud to do things like the sentiment analysis, the image tagging, etc., to understand, for instance, how many people are in a certain image or what type of objects and so forth. And all of those are there for you to consume through this interface and incorporate the resulting insight into your reports, no code required. The next slide. When you're outgrown this interface and you want to do some experimentation of your own so that you can leverage some of the established techniques, established algorithms in data science to produce your own classification, your own image tagging, your own sentiment analysis, and so forth. You can move on to, I would say, a medium-sized tool, medium-power tool, which we call the Azure Machine Learning Studio. Doesn't require a huge budget for you to start. It's a prototyping tool with a graphical user interface. Let's have a look at the next slide. That's an example of what the tool interface looks like. And it is actually an example of a customer relationship prediction. We're trying to figure out in this particular workflow whether we'll have a customer churn. Is the customer going to stay with us or not? And or we have an upselling opportunity to that customer, and or a particular product is interesting to the customer. So we're trying from a common data set that comes from a CRM system to run 3 different workflows in parallel and figure out 3 different things in parallel and train our models to figure out those things in parallel. The boxes that you're seeing represent algorithms that are already coded, available for you to run, and you can augment with your own code in a custom Python box if you want, and make it part of the workflow. You can run this on our own Azure cloud and choose the size of the infrastructure that actually runs your compute based on the size of the problem, the complexity of your problem. Next slide, please. Once you have leveraged those existing algorithms, you may actually want to go further and implement your own, the fancy ones that Ken was mentioning, such as convolutional neural networks that are custom tailored to your specific problem and data set. And in that case, you will have to resort to coding your own. So, and implementing also a very complex workflow that feeds the images, the data, the metadata of those images, etc., to those pieces of code. Let's go to the next slide and give an example of such a complex workflow. So in this particular case, you're using a tool that is designed to scale to very large data sets, for want of a other term, big data, to solve a big data problem. We're ingesting sales data in this particular example to a common data model, and we're feeding that common data model data to a series of Python notebooks that run on Databricks, a commonly used technology based on open source Spark that is hosted in our cloud. There's actually a series of these Databricks notebooks that clean the data, so implement transformations of those data that is not available or needs to be customized, and it's not just one of the libraries that we offer as if you want a pre-cooked service that you can exploit. Then we enrich that data with our own custom algorithms. We do, for instance, our own image tagging, and we write out into another common data model folder for other processing to take place. The orchestration of this workflow can be quite complex. Having the right data in the right place at the right time can be problematic when you have many data sources, very large data sets. So we offer a tool to do so. It's called Azure Data Factory. In each of those boxes that have the little red squares, you can run Python code on a Databricks cluster. And that's my next slide example. So what you do with sales data, Ken was alluding to it before, you recommend further sales if you want to leverage the profit-making ability that data gives you. And this is an example, for instance, of a recommender designed to run on a very large scale cluster running on Spark, and with a technology to do distributed computation, distributed neural networks in particular, called Horovod. And as you can see, although the technology itself is complex, the code to invoke this, provision the cluster, get the computation done, etc., is relatively short. This is an actual example that we've, of course, anonymized and made available for public consumptions in one of our workshops to do exactly such a thing. So build a recommender for a very large data set based on a media customer, one of those that Ken was alluding to. Okay. In these few slides, I just hope that I was able to present to you the case that you don't need to start from the huge system. You can get to the huge system with custom code. You can start with prototyping and visualization in Power BI. You can move on to graphical prototyping with tools like ML Studio and so forth. Microsoft's advantage, I would say, is we allow you to do all of that on an agile and productive platform. And we allow you to do that leveraging open source libraries, open source tools, on top of which we've just built graphical interfaces to make them easier for you to consume. But ultimately, if you wanted to use those tools in their native form, if you want, and just run them anywhere, you could do exactly that. You can run them on our cloud, you can run them on premises. Most importantly, you can run them on the edge. We do allow you to develop models in the cloud through our tools and then push them onto edge devices such as cameras in your stores or on the field if you're a media and sports organization. And we work with partners such as Luxoft to build enterprise solutions, so you don't need to develop them from scratch. You can work with us and with our partners to consume solutions that they've built and templates that we published and they published on our cloud for you to consume directly through our marketplaces and or their marketplaces. I want to make an offer to you. We actually teach how to build all of this with a workshop, and They are typically run at the Microsoft Technology Centers. The link you see on the bottom of the slide actually has a list of those Microsoft Technology Centers and the workshops you can find there.
Fantastic. And this, of course, you will be getting the slides. So everyone, you can, even though you're trying to copy down this address right now, you'll get it in just a little while. Now, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what do you do now? Typically, as I said, get people together, organize a workshop. Next slide. And the key topics you need to look at is what data do you have? As I said, your use cases, how do you monetize them? What are the pricing models? You can ignore the yellow ink, we'll get to that. What business models you can put around them, and what solutions can you build to implement it? The big trick, get everybody together, start talking, lead the discussion, find out what you've got, and find out what the big, the other one says, when you start these workshops, find out what the big business problems and what strategic objectives you have for your company in the next year, next 2 years, and how do you make the decisions around them? And what could you do with your data on hand if it was better, more widely available faster? Could you do to make those decisions? And of that data, what would you have to get insights from it in order to help? Next slide. Okay, we have an offer. If you're ready to go, if you want to do data monetization, if your company has bought into doing this and would like to get started or has started a project, needs some guidance, we want you to discover how you can solve your business challenges. It's exclusive to you. You'll be receiving the email about it. It's no cost to you. It's bespoke. We're going to work with you on your data, on your use cases, and it's going to be practical on solutions. We start with an online workshop with you, then we do an in-person session, and then we get to the practical recommendations. The goal, ROI, 9 to 12 months. Give you something that will enable you to build upon. And as I said, if you're ready to go, so are we. Next slide. Now, key takeaways. Next. Okay, ways to monetize data. Direct, indirect. Indirect, you're monetizing your business. Direct, you're selling your data. You're enriching it and making it available to third parties who will pay you to get at your data. And data monetization is a team sport. Seek out people with experience to help you. There's nothing like just getting in there and doing it and talking to others. You need help to determine what your key performance indicators or key metrics should be. Talk to someone in finance. There are people who are paid to determine what those are and pass them up the line for approval. They're more than happy to help you. Multiple parts of your business should be involved in the pilot. Yes, you can sometimes do things in the small, but it's more interesting to get other people bought in, get other parts of the business, other silos to come and participate and possibly see what this is good and what they could do to help you and what your efforts could do to help them. If you want to become a data alchemist, it's about solving business problems. The algorithms follow. Once you know what you're trying to solve, figuring out how to solve it's a lot easier. And then the algorithms suggest themselves. Be ready to articulate the value of the data projects you're involved to anyone at any time. Remember, you're always competing for dollars for projects. Have an elevator pitch ready. What are you going to do to save the company money, and when and how? Got to get control of your data and clean it up. A lot of isolated systems, everything works fine. The minute you try to orchestrate and bring the data together, you're going to find you have some work to do. Doing the data scientist at the end of that is relatively easy. Do a pilot, validate it, scale up. There's nothing like showing a first success to be funded for further success. And always express your results in ways that business owners can act on them. Don't put equations in front of them. Put results they can act on. And then look for other problems to solve once you've scaled up your system. Next slide. Questions. Patrick?
Thanks, everyone. First question we have here is, my firm restricts the use of a cloud. Can I do the same on Hadoop infrastructure and leveraging the data sets?
This is a classic problem for some companies where you're not allowed to use the cloud. I've seen this a lot. I started working with financial institutions. There was a time when everything had to be done in-house for compliance, for regulatory, because you couldn't trust the private cloud to get it right. A lot of that has changed. Public clouds, Azure, Amazon, Google, have gone to great lengths to make sure they can offer you the same protections that you can get in your own data center. And if you haven't looked at them recently, it's worth going back and having a look and looking up how they're doing compliance and handling of personal identifiable information, protecting data from hacks, protecting data from unauthorized access. And the reason I like using the cloud, and the reason I've had banks go over to using the cloud when they first didn't think they could, is it really is a matter of getting some private lines into a cloud center, into a data center where your government regulations and rules allow you to store data with approval, and then put the data in and then use all those tools to get your analysis done. When you can't, yeah, a lot of it, it's a Hadoop cluster with Spark. We have a lot of experience dealing with that very problem. While I say I think more increasingly you should use the cloud, some of you can't. And we know how to put the systems in and work with you to build the systems where you can do this entirely in-house. It's really up to you. There's some parts of the world where they absolutely, positively want it in-house for whatever reason. We certainly do that for them at scale. And other places where it turns out you just need to get more familiar with what cloud providers are offering you to get that level of assurance and know that your government agencies approve you putting the data in the cloud. And that's another solution. And what was the next one, Patrick?
Okay, next question is around, do we have an approach for determining the value of data within the enterprise, both from data quality management perspective and obviously the insights that that data can offer before you kick off a full-blown project and deciding if you want to take a top down?
Okay, that's a very common way people are thinking about data monetization, is how do you determine the value of your data? I can almost say that's the wrong kind of question to start asking. The question is, what areas of my business do I want to optimize? And then what kind of information would let me make those decisions better, faster? And then what data do we have that will help with those decisions? And then pick a reasonably compact project, one where you can get the data together and you can get results in 9 to 12 months. And that's why you have a workshop. Lay it out on the table. When we do workshops, it's like we offer to help companies that are really wanting to get into this, even just get their toe in the water for a pilot project. Because having the workshop where you lay out and map your business priorities against optimizations you can do, and then figure out the data you've got and then what you need to do to it to fulfill those business optimizations. That's the way.
It seems like that brought us to the conclusion of the questions we had. I'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining this discussion today. Very insightful. We had expertise not only from the Luxoft end, but obviously Giovanni, one of our distinguished guests from Microsoft. I really appreciate you joining us. As mentioned earlier, this will be recorded. You will have full access to that in about 1 to 2 business days. And the workshop offer is still on the table. We want to help. We're here to work together, not only in the data monetization space, but obviously broad across the Luxoft offering perspective. And we'd love to maintain and grow our relationships after this webinar. Stay tuned for the next one. We'll be actively starting a new series around some of these hot topics as we move forward. And thank you all for being here. This is Pat Corcoran from Luxoft signing off.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.